Hello, everyone. Welcome. We're just giving folks a couple of minutes to move from the waiting room into our meeting room, and we'll start in the next minute or so as a few more folks are able to join us. Thanks for joining. You're welcome to say hello in the chat box to get us started today. Excellent. Yeah, thanks everyone. Feel free to introduce yourself in the chat box. Let us know where you're from or maybe the role that you're holding. You've got a lot of options today to participate. We welcome the use of the chat box. Webcams on or off, whatever helps you engage in training most. And we will get started with slides and content here in a minute. All right, every time I say we're going to get started, somebody else pops in to join us. So Steph, would you mind pulling up slides and I'll get us through our intro to our topic today so we can dive into content. Welcome everyone as you join. Perfect. Thank you all for being here. So as I mentioned in the chat box, my name's Johanna. I'm just going to introduce you to the topic today. So we're here for part 3 of the Youth Voice in Evaluation Implementation Training. Like seeing the names and familiar voices of those of you that have shared with us or joined with us in the first 2 sessions, and welcome. You're welcome and in the right place if this is your first session. Today's training is funded by a grant from SAMHSA, and we want to acknowledge that while the funding for this opportunity comes from SAMHSA, the trainer's views and the content you experience are not necessarily endorsed by SAMHSA or the government. If for any reason today's sessions should experience a security or tech info, we will email you with new meeting information. So if you get disconnected from this meeting, please check your email. Today's training is offered by the National Training and Technical Assistance Center, lovingly called NTAC. We are funded to provide support to the children and youth mental health workforce. If you found us and are at our training today, you are in the right place and you are a part of our audience. We are grateful to have the opportunity to provide many services that I'm going to review quickly in the next couple of slides, this training being just one such of those resources. Beth, if we can do next slide. Perfect. NTAC is a collaboration of many partners. Today you're going to hear from myself and Joshua from Youth Move National. We're one of the core partners offering the services of NTAC. We include and invite many subject matter experts, including Steph, who you're going to meet in just a minute. Overall, the NTAC Center is to support all children, youth, and young adult families in accessing evidence-based and promising practices to support their mental health journeys. And we're really grateful for the work that you do in your communities to make that happen. We serve and provide offerings to many audiences, including providers, mental health workers, peer providers, youth and family advocates. If you found us, you're in the right place. And if there are others in your community that would benefit from our trainings or more specific consultation via individualized technical assistance, we'd welcome your invitation and reach out. Training is just one of the services we offer. We also create products. We send out rich monthly and even more frequently than monthly newsletters with resources to support you in your work. We provide individual technical assistance as well as providing affinity or community of practice groups to engage in topics related to systems of care and child and youth mental health. All right, NTAC brought us together today. We're grateful to be in space with you. As I mentioned, I'm Johanna, Executive Director at Youth Move National. I've presented earlier in this series and just have the honor to welcome and introduce our expert today, Steph, who's going to be taking us through the third part of our data journey. So we've moved from why do we collect data, how do we engage young people in being the leaders in data collection and evaluation, to thinking about what the heck do we do with data and how does it inform our programs, how do we think about it as quality improvement metrics, how do we think about making use of our data to make our youth offerings stronger. Today, we're going to talk about how to take our data and turn it into storytelling, and thinking about how can we really bring data to life to help guide our decisions with external stakeholders and providers. And very excited that you all are with us for part 3. I would love to welcome Steph into the space to introduce herself and set us up for the learning that we are going to cover today.
Thank you, Johanna. Hi, everyone. I was part of part 1 session, just popped in to see who was going to be in the room for this session. I know we've got some new faces, and I'm excited to get into what we're going to cover today. So here's a glamour shot of me and my my puppy Toby. He will make his appearance in the background, I'm sure, maybe lay out on my couch back here. But a little bit about me. So I've worked in public health and evaluation and data viz world for about 10 years now. In my role, I come from Michigan Public Health Institute, and that's how Johanna and Joshua and I have worked together in the past. But I do a lot of work around data viz, consulting on products, trying to make things as user-friendly as possible, and really focusing around this idea of storytelling with data. So I work with a lot of groups trying to make products accessible, picking target audiences, and going from there. And then in my spare time, if anybody has seen Bunny the dog on Instagram, I'm currently teaching my dog to talk using AAC, which are buttons that are recorded. Really cool, really nerdy about it. So if you have any questions at the end, I could talk a bunch about my talking dog. Okay, so getting into it. Some of the things that we're going to use today with Zoom, we're going to use the chat feature. We're going to use the raising hand feature and reactions. I know in our last session, we talked about different interaction ways and wanting to learn other things other than just Menti. And we will be using Menti today. We'll also use the Annotate feature in Zoom to do some participation. If you have any questions, you can always throw them in the chat. Use your voice. We're open to making this a really interactive session. So let's first start with practicing with that Zoom Annotate feature. If you haven't used it before, you can see the circled in red is how you would access it using your computer. There's a tool at the bottom that says Annotate, this little pencil, and then you can stamp. You can draw. If you're on your phone, the same feature is that blue pencil button. All right, so practice time. A little bit different way to represent where we're all from. If you could take that annotation feature and place a stamp of your choice or drawing or whatever, anywhere on the map that you represent. Ooh, yeah, people are figuring it out. I see. Let me get my little stamp up here. So I am located in East Lansing, Michigan. Looks like we've got some Iowa, Texas, Georgia, Kentucky, New York. Notice how I put the labels on the map so I wouldn't have to embarrassingly guess which states are which. I'm a data viz person, not a geography person. Yeah, we've got some, I think that's Pasadena. I remember that from last time. Awesome. Yep. And if anybody wants to throw their place in the chat, if you're having issues with annotation, also good ways to interact. Yeah. See, everybody is kind of figuring out that annotation. All right, cool. Well, I'm going to clear it and we're going to practice again on another slide. let me take a little, well, okay. All right, so next slide, next little practice. I'm wondering, what role do you hold, or what roles do you hold? So place a stamp in the area that you're coming from. Got a lot of evaluators in the room, lots of youth coordinators, youth advocates. Oh, I love all the choices of stamps too. Everybody has their own reason of choosing that. Yeah. All right. Youth advocates, some grantees, lots of youth coordinators, and then something else. Does anybody have in the chat what their something else is? Suicide prevention trainer. All right. Okay, cool. So we're comfortable with annotation, right? We know how to use that now. That's a fun tool we can use in future work presentations, making something a little bit more interactive. And it's also just a quick data viz too. So we, just by looking at this board, we see representation from these different areas, and giving you a little bit of each area here. So let me clear that. Oops. All right. So why we're here today and what we're going to cover in the next 2.5 hours of cozy time together. So first, one of our learning goals is to gain an understanding of how to make sense of data. We're also going to identify strategies for telling stories with your data and with evaluation results. And we're also going to identify strategies for presenting results and data for program expansion and sustainability. So one more time, take out that little annotation stamp, and real quick, just put a stamp next to what you are most excited about out of these learning goals. Awesome. So lots of people, lots of hearts around those strategies for presenting results and data. Ooh, and what I see also in this theme of data viz is that there's someone here that's interested in everything we're covering, or there's at least one person. I meant to say there's at least one person interested in everything we're covering. So that's good. All right, great. Thank you all for going on that little annotation journey. I'm going to clear the board again. Okay. So you may be wondering, what is data visualization? I'm going to use that term a lot throughout this presentation. And all I mean when I say that is, data visualization is a graphic representation of information and data. That's it. So that can involve so many different things. You may have a very specific thing that comes to mind when you hear data visualization. And today we're just going to talk about it very broadly with some specific examples within that. So everybody's favorite. I'm getting all the participation out of the way at first, just so I know who's in the room, who I'm teaching to, and making sure that I'm covering the things that are most important to everybody. So if you want to take out your phone, or if you want to go to a different web page and go to menti.com and use the code. Did you already get it in the chat? Oh, Joanne, you're so good. Code 11001329. And if you just rank your experience with each of these items, so on a scale of, so this is going to be on Menti. Yeah, there we go. Some people annotating, some people trying to figure out how to get off annotation. So the lowest, the left-hand side is never have I ever done this thing. Right-hand side is I am a pro. I don't even need to be in this session. I know everything there is about data viz, or data analysis, collecting data, graphic design, presenting data. Cool. So I'm seeing a mix of experience. Lots of people feel good about their collecting data skills. And then we see that, data viz, graphic design, presenting data, all kind of falling in the same space. Let me clear. Awesome. Yeah, so some people are saying they love to watch the bar graph shift. Me too. It's really fun, these interactive things in Menti that we can use. Hashtag data nerds. I feel you, Diana. All right. So I'm going to move on, get to this next Menti poll. And I'll save this one, and when we send out slides, it'll have a nice little image of where we all fell with this one. All right, so it should have shifted on your screen. This question, I really hope we talk about ... Just give me an idea of something you came here for, maybe a question you have, something that you really hope we get to during this session.
The question didn't change for me on the Menti poll. I'm not sure if anyone else is experiencing that.
Let me try and refresh. Okay. Give me just a quick little second. Well, if anybody would like to type it in the chat, how about now? Did it change?
No,
all right. Gonna roll with it and just say if anybody has things that they want to type in the chat, I think just for time. Oops. I thought I had everything worked out, but all right, so we have somebody said in the chat, presenting data in a clear, accessible, aesthetically pleasing way to stakeholders. Gotcha covered. Someone else asked about how to make data look good when presenting and sharing with external partners. Also things about language, techniques, hot topics to gain authentic engagement from stakeholders. And hoping to talk about data presentation. So as a college student about to start their senior thesis, coming in handy for school research and work research. Yes, I want to help you with that. That would be something we're definitely going to cover in this. Also keeping true to the intent of people we collect data from, while also keeping it understandable, accessible, and able to be utilized, as qualitative data is hard. Yes, I agree with that. We'll touch on qualitative data and different ideas for how to present that. Meaningful questions that allow for great representation of data that focuses on equity. Love that. I will make sure to touch on that. I've got some new slides coming soon about with a health equity focus and racism in data. Resources when I'm having a creative block. Got you covered, Nicole. We have got a whole resource sheet coming. And then youth focused data. All right, thank you so much everybody for rolling with that. Changing direction. I must admit Menti is not a tool I use that often. So, technical issues do come up. So All right, so the plan for today, these are the chunks that we're going to break into, and feel free if you want to keep putting things in the chat throughout as questions come up, or as you have a new concept that you want to hear about. I'll try and incorporate it in as we go through. So we are going to talk about the basics, what data viz is, why I think it's important that we use it. Then we're going to talk about some principles of good design. And then at the end, we're going to have time to practice. So first section, let's talk about data viz and how it's for everybody, and start with some of the basics. So first, I want you to go to those little reactions and choose the emoji that best describes a favorite hobby that you have. So you'll find this by going to that area on your screen that says reactions, I believe. I can't see it on mine in presentation mode, but. And there may be extras. Oh, I see we've got dancing. I see video games, rainbows and books. Listening to music theater. I'm guessing, this is all guesses. I love this. So you'll see on everybody else, if you can see other screens, music, cats, basketball, soccer. Yeah, I got that. So see, we can use things like this in the most simple way to represent data. Icons, starting to group things with ideas like that. Data viz can be so simple and so easy to do. And I love doing this in a group when we all have paper and pencil, and I ask people to represent themselves using some sort of data visualization. And a lot of people draw pictures, and that's perfectly it. Data viz is representing information in a visual way. Oh, and I love it. I see in the chat people are using the emojis too. Love it. Okay, so I'm going to move through these sections talking about the why of data first. So why do we need data viz? What's the sell? Why do you need to use data viz in your work? So for me, there's a few different points of why we would use this. First is to communicate data information quickly and easily. So data viz shows data, and it shows good data visualizations can present a lot of numbers in a small space. It can make it really easy to look at big data sets and make it coherent. And it can also encourage your eye to quickly compare different pieces of data and reveal different trends over time or in one point of time. It's also used to engage audiences. So how many of you have ever gotten a giant 30-page report, looked at it, and had to hunt down the little piece of information you need, pull it out, put it in a grant? It's taxing, it's exhausting, and looking at big chunks of text like that, that's not how our eyes are set up in our brains to process information. So data viz is going to serve that purpose of engaging your audience and helping them, if they have a shorter attention span, getting that piece of information and that story as you'd want them to take it. It also helps with standing out in a crowd. So you've probably heard the word infographics. It's pretty hot these days. Everywhere you look, it's in health clinics, it's in schools, it's on Instagram, it's everywhere. You walk into the doctor's office and there's, all the text that you'd normally see on a paper is now in an infographic, which is really cool. It means that people are understanding that infographics are a visual representation of this information. It's easy to summarize bite-sized pieces of information in a compelling way, and it helps your message stand out. You can also use data visualization for identifying areas that need attention or improvement. So we'll talk a lot about that today when we look at examples from the YVAL survey. We'll also look at it when specifically thinking about using DataViz for evaluation. So the who is your audience for DataViz? Who do you want to share your message with? So we know that not everybody needs to hear everything. You need to pick the right information for the right audience. And the way that you talk about the data may be different depending on what groups you're talking to. So the language would be different if you're talking to clinicians or writing for a research paper versus language for like youth participants. Also talking to staff members, the way that you present the data is going to look different. Same with presenting to school boards, presenting to funders. Choosing the audience is going to help shape those messages of your data. Then the what is data sources. So a lot of people, you already have data that you can use. Some people get stuck on feeling like there's no data available or trying to think of what data that you already have. You may already have things from YVAL if you've done that with your organization. There's other program data sources we can talk about. Other survey data like national data from the YRBS or the BRFS, state level, school level surveys. Lots of stuff is out there. I'm wondering if anybody has other data sources that they're already starting to think about when we talk about DataViz or data sources you're currently working with. Feel free to drop those in the chat. There may be things like focus groups you've done. Attendance data. That's definitely a source of data. Annual member surveys. Yep. Yeah, and it doesn't have to be these big complicated data sets either. Membership count, that's great. Yeah, anything that is information source is a data source. Yep, satisfaction surveys, health and safety interviews, love that. Yeah, so we're thinking about those data sources, keeping a little like in the back of our mind, thinking about these data sources because they'll come into play later. Can always keep dropping things in chat. I'm gonna just move us right along into the how. So when we talk about DataViz containers, this is anything that contains your data message. Any sort of media, either physical or virtual, anything that gets your message across. So things you can post on Facebook, a poster that you put up in a local business, or anything else really, just anything that contains your message is what I refer to as DataViz container. We'll talk about this later. So all these concepts that I'm introducing now, they're coming back later on. So this is a container that we refer to as an infographic a lot of the times. There's also things for social media, so that square, that Instagram size, really easy bite-sized piece of information that's shared in this container. And they can also live on t-shirts. We've had quite a few organizations that have done social media campaigns like this, or we've designed for quality improvement teams that want to show their their stats of their group. So anything that contains the message is a DataViz container. Here's another example of that Instagram size. Really thinking about when you're wanting to share data, how do you want it to live? Do you want it to be in a square size? Do you want it to be printable? Just things to think about as we talk about that design. And data viz can be funny too. I know somebody said their hobby was cats, so this one's for you. So this guy tracked his cat and how often they meowed. And it's a heat map that shows the time of day and the frequency of meows. So you see that for some reason at 4:30 in the morning, this cat is meowing a lot. I love these types of things with data viz, getting creative with how we package information around us. You can find so many fun examples like this online. And it's about making it really understandable, making it a quick, short attention span. You look at this and your eye is instantly drawn to those darker areas and then to the interpretation of what that means. Hashtag data nerds. All right, so what about qualitative data? This came up in one of the things we were curious about. And, data viz doesn't have to be limited to just numbers from the program. It can also have some cool options with how we visualize qualitative data in addition to numbers or alone. One way that I've loved to do this before with programs is when we look at that satisfaction question, how satisfied were you with the program? You can always add those little qualitative bits, those contextual pieces next to that. So when talking about, I'm very satisfied, well, throw a quote next to it. And this came from a work I did with a domestic violence advocates, or it was domestic violence shelter and their work with advocates and their satisfaction with their advocate program. So it's cool. It's a way to pull those in without having a whole section of something like a word cloud, and giving more context to where those comments are coming from. We see word clouds a lot. They are really cool. The only downside is it tends to place a lot of weight on how often a word comes up. So if you're working with quotes or there's more context around a word, these are good for like one word answers, or for this one, how do you best describe your favorite teacher? So those one word answers fit really well with a word cloud. Those qualitative quotes could be paired with quantitative data appropriately. Or another example, just to get you thinking about qualitative, you can also think about grouping the themes of your qualitative data. There's a lot of evaluators in the room, so when you think about writing those reports and having those key themes and writing narrative under it, putting it into a visual like this is a really cool way to start grouping those key themes that come up and giving your audience an easier chance of understanding the groupings of things. So this one was about a needs assessment for a fatherhood program, looking at what fathers said that they needed. And we did this for a Michigan-based program. Couple other qualitative tips. We can use icons to describe responses, and we can also use icons of photos, putting those next to responses, just a way to break up all of the text and make it look more visual. All right. So the last section, the how. So how on earth do we do this? How do we take all this data? How do we think about our audience? How do we think about our container, the purpose? I know it's a lot, and it seems like putting all the pieces together, it seems like a big ask, but I think if we break it down this way, and I can show you how I do it in this next example, we'll start piecing together what we'll talk about at the end, which is an example from your work. So when I think about data viz, I always start with these 4 guiding questions. So I want to know what data am I already collecting? So thinking about the what data. I think about what stories could I tell from this data. So I want to pick out what I think is reasonable from what I'm seeing in the data. And then I pick out the audience. So that's something either I know because a client is telling me, we want to create this for somebody. And also the purpose. Usually there's a grant that is funding it with objectives and things that you need to answer with the data. So those are usually sometimes easy answers, as well as the container. That's where a lot of it comes guided with, do you need to do a presentation? Do you want a handout? Back thinking of those containers and all the ways data can live. That's where things get fun. So in this example, I'm going to talk through a recent project I did in Michigan using the Michigan Behavioral Risk Factors Survey. So each state has their BRFS data. For Michigan alone, we have a set of 8 questions that we ask that are aligned with the ACEs. So ACEs are adverse childhood experiences, and they are potentially traumatic events that occur before the age of 18. So things like violence, abuse, growing up in a family with mental health or substance use problems. A lot of you are probably very familiar with them. The recent studies that have been done, there's a lot of funding right now in Michigan around ACEs, and I was really excited to work on this project with this group that wanted to publish information about the ACEs from Michigan's BRFS. So data source, BRFS. So then that second question about what stories you can tell from the data, I knew that working with the client, these 2 pieces were important to her. She wanted to talk about that ACEs are common and that ACEs are linked to chronic health problems. So those were the 2 key things that we wanted to talk about in this brief. And we knew that that was the main story, and that's what we would have to focus the main design around, is that they're common. So we're normalizing that ACEs are common and that they're linked to these chronic health problems. Then we wanted to pick the audience so that we weren't creating a brief that was technical or above what we were trying to get across with the message. And we know that based on audience, the story can, or the language we use can shift. So we picked out that we wanted this to be available for community members. We wanted this to be for those that work with children and youth and clinicians. So picking that audience shaped how we talked about the data. We're not talking about odds ratios or anything like that. We really wanted to focus on what is a clear message when it comes to communicating data to general community. And side note, like a lot of this is things that you may feel like it's really clear, but until you test it with community members, like I sent my friend the brief that I was designing and asked, hey, is this clear the way I'm talking about data? And so even things like that can shift how you present data and talk about it when you do those pilot testings. All right, so the last one was thinking about, why would you be telling the story to this audience? So picking that purpose, and that shaped a lot of the content that we put into this brief. So we wanted to say that ACEs can be prevented and that we need to know about the issue in order to prevent it. Those were the very clear things that the client wanted. And in the field and the research, those are some of the key points right now, is that they're preventable and that we need to know about the issue in order to prevent it. Then picking the container, we wanted it to be a 2-pager, something easy that could be distributed at conferences. And from the beginning, that was, it's going to live on an infographic, a handout, an 8.5 by 11. So when we looked at the data, we knew that this was the data we had. You can see that this is just not a pretty way to look at it. You see the tables. It takes just a lot of brain power to read the label, make the interpretation, see the percentage, try and understand, okay, is that a lot? Is that a little? So this is what I was working with when I got the data, and then this is what we were able to turn it into. So visualizing that table, making it much more clear for the audience, giving those direct labels of % of Michigan adults that experienced this in their childhood. And within the greater infographic, it looks something like this. So back to that purpose that we want to normalize and say, yes, ACEs are common. On this icon grouping, we see that a huge amount of those colored in boxes represent those that have one or more ACE. And we also wanted to talk about how ACEs, I don't have that other slide. Oh, wanted to show you the rest of this. We also wanted to talk about that they're preventable and that there's things that can be done to help support those with ACEs. So that's what you see at the bottom of this page. I wish I had it in in a clearer view, but that was the whole of this. This is also about to be published on Michigan's website. So happy to share the link to that too when it comes up. But that is the story so far of how we move through those questions and how we get to that final product based on how we answer those things. So I want to give you all plenty of breaks. I really believe that like 45 minutes is the limit to sit and listen. This one comes a little bit early. So I'm hoping that we can take a 5-minute break and come back at 45, whatever number 45 you're living in right now. I know we've got some West Coasters, it's 12:45. For me, it's 3:45. So I will see you back in 5 minutes. All right, so hopefully everyone is coming on back. Maybe you grabbed lunch or just a little stretch break. Maybe next break, I'll have Joshua lead us through some stretches. Okay, so could I get a little thumbs up or reaction or something just to know everybody has made it back? Cool. Love it. All right. Okay, so this next section, we're going to go over some guidelines for good data design. These are some general things, and I just want to preface this with saying that there's just so much to learn about design, and as far as graphic design, data design. I have a whole section on chart design that we're not going into. And I know that came up with a lot of questions about what we would cover. So this is just a very broad overview. I'll also have a section where we talk about the toolbox, and that will reference a handout that you'll be sent. You'll also have a chance to access it today during the training if you want to follow along live. But again, there's just so much to go over. I may speed through it, but just know it's a chance just to get your feet wet and get introduced to these concepts and then dive into them later. I'm also available as technical assistance with this work. So if something really interests you, we can go through it together later. So starting with charts and trying to figure out what the best chart is for the data that you're trying to present. I know it seems like a really big open-ended thing, and I hope that these guiding questions will help you start narrowing down what chart you can choose to tell your story the best based on the data that you have. There's a lot of tools that I have on the handout that will be really good resources. Big names like Stephanie Evergreen. If anybody's heard of her, she's big in the data viz world. I joke that I'm the other Stephanie, maybe like Stephanie on the cheap or something. I don't know, but there's Stephanie Evergreen and Emery. Thank you, Joshua. Thank you for that laugh react. Yes, other people appreciate that. Good. So starting with some of those big questions to ask, I start with, do you want to compare values? These are good for knowing, which is better, what's more effective, did some people do better than others? The benefit of this is you can easily compare one or many values, and it's easy to show those highs and lows. So think about the standard horizontal bar charts, doing something back to back. That's a good place to start if you're trying to compare values. And then what if you want to describe your data set? So describing maybe age groups, or you're trying to just describe gender, or looking at how frequently, how much. These are really great for showing individual parts that make up a whole of something. So think about like this icon array in the lower right-hand corner. That's good for showing individual parts making up a whole of something. Another thing you can ask is, do you want to show data changing over time? If that is the case and you want to show that, and you want to show what happened over time, did things improve? How did they perform compared to previous years? Things like line charts, area charts, having multiple lines, these are all going to help us understand the range of information over time. We're going to be able to see those outliers, like maybe there's a big spike in July or something like that. Maybe when you look at all of your clinicians and their caseloads, you see somebody is has way more than others, or there's something over time that's happened with that. So for overtime, lines, area, stacked area, all good things to use. And understanding relationship of data, maybe that's something you want to do with a flow chart. Also using a scatter chart, that's a natural way to understand the relationship between one set of values and another. And again, you can easily see those highs and lows. You can see how one variable relates to another. If there's a correlation, is there an influence? Flow charts would be great if you're thinking of using qualitative data. So again, big overview, lots of options, lots of things that go into considering what to use. And these are all just introductory ideas. And then the last point for all those evaluators and evaluation curious folks on the phone, if you're trying to use your data for evaluation, the key thing that sets it apart from all of those other methods is adding that interpretation to the chart. So adding a bar for a benchmark, maybe taking indicators and making it filled in bubbles or not filled in, using that diverged, it's supposed to be stacked bar, sorry about that, staked bar, and lining up and showing the difference between strongly disagree and agree. All of these things where you're adding that interpretation directly onto the chart so that people can make those meaningful stories out of the data and drive decision making. So we'll focus on this when we talk about chart design. My lens is on evaluation always, and a lot of the ways that I design charts are purposely to guide the story about the data, not to mislead the story, but to add that interpretation that guides where we want the readers to go with the story. So good data visualization is also backed by science. It's not just a bunch of stuff that we're making up. about what looks good and what doesn't. I have a resource on your handout that you'll get that goes through all of these descriptors for good data visualization. So some things that takes it from garbage to good include making things purposeful, making it clear and easy to interpret, making it strategic in design, and having it be absent of clutter. And most importantly, the one message of this whole presentation is that it tells a story, because data visualization is about good storytelling. So that handout that I was talking about, if you want to go to this link, you'll get a sneak peek of the handout before it's sent out. I'll be talking about these sources throughout the presentation. So you can type this in, it's a little shortened link. It's bit.ly/NTAC-dataviz. And that'll pull up a Google Drive PDF. You can download it, use it how you wish. Thank you, Joanne. Appreciate that. So that's in the chat if you need to copy it out. You don't have to pull it up, but if you're one of those people that want to follow along as we're talking about it, or look at the resources as I'm explaining them, they're right there. All right, so that's still in the chat if anybody needs it. I am going to get into each of these sections. Again, big overview, lots of things that can be learned from each of these segments, but just as an overview, get your feet wet. Here we go. Talking about fonts, it's something that a lot of people are familiar with. One thing to remember with fonts is always use easy to read fonts. We tend to gravitate towards cute or interesting, but if your audience can't read your fonts, they can't get your message. Also, you want to think about using fonts that reflect your purpose. Okay, good. We have additional people joining. Welcome. So thinking about your purpose, do you want to communicate something that's more business feel? What about creative, personal, or like a minimalist feel? These are all ideas of how to choose a font that describes your purpose and reflects what your message is. I would suggest, and this is not a rule, I know a lot of people are hung up on like, okay, well, tell me exactly what are the rules to data viz. I'm here to say, like, you can break in any rule. I would just suggest that using 2 fonts and 4 variations is pretty much the maximum. So for this presentation, when I say that, I mean, I'm using this for all the titles, Franklin Gothic Heavy, and for body copy, I'm using this font. You may also hear typeface, typographies, all referring to those standard fonts that you can include in your work. So within that, using those 2 and then using things within it like bold, italics, all of that, that's kind of the limit to keep the eye understanding like the hierarchy of, okay, this is a title and this is text, and that's my suggestion. As far as tools to use for fonts, there's so many things out there for finding cool, unique fonts, downloading them, figuring out what font it is on a web page that you like. I really love Identifont. Identifont is something where you can download fonts or search fonts by their appearance or name. You can also upload a picture. So if you find a website you really like, you can upload a screenshot and find what font they're using on that website. Really cool if you're trying to match the branding of an organization. Yeah, it is cool. Thank you. But One thing to touch on with fonts, there's so many options for downloading, and I tend to still stick to the standard ones that come in Microsoft products, just because when creating a document and say I want to send it to a client, the chance of them having it downloaded on their computer is pretty slim, and it causes some compatibility issues. So although fonts are really cool to play with and get new ones, definitely a good tip to just stick with the ones that come in Microsoft. All right, so color. Color can make your data viz pop. It can communicate subtle, important messages. You want to put some thoughts into why you're choosing your colors and what they could possibly convey. Things like following your organization's brand, or picking something that's appropriate for the content or the audience that you have. So following Youth Move Nationals brand, I picked that very specific red, or doing something appropriate for, if I was making an infographic for SAMHSA, I would use that dark blue color. For this presentation, I've used 2 main colors and 2 complementary colors. Again, just small rules that can kind of be guidelines for design. If you really need more colors, you can always use shades within those main and complementary colors. And something to know about colors is you'll hear things like hex code, RGB, I always say RBG, and not quite the same. So RGB is those 3 numbers versus the hashtag numbers are the hex code. So for this presentation, this is what I'm using. I have some tools on that resource guide. I believe one does touch on color blindness and how to check and make sure that even if you're designing in color, that your point is still coming across if it's in black and white, grayscale, any sort of color seeing differences. So that's a consideration to make as you're designing and using color. There's really cool tools on there for finding colors from websites or creating a color palette. One thing I use often, this is called Coolors. It's like colors, but with an extra O, Coolors. And this is just a little video of how this is a video, not me doing it right now, woo, of selecting all of the colors and then deciding, what are the complementary colors I can use with that. A cool feature with this is if you plug in the colors you want to use and hit the space bar, it'll start changing and coming up with other colors that might work with that palette. And then it'll give you those codes for coming up with the design. So it's a fun site to play around with if you're stuck on, I have one color that I really like, but I don't know what goes with it. This site is infinite with its suggestions. All right, so layout. So this is a big piece of when we're thinking about using that container of something that's going to live in either something printed out or in a standard piece of paper, something like that. Thinking about the arrangement of the data, images, things like that on the page. I have a few ideas of when I'm stuck with where do I even start, I tend to look at these different types of layouts. So once you've gotten to the stage, you probably know what your purpose is of the infographic or the data viz, or at least I hope you do. And you can start selecting that layout that best suits your story. So one example is this quick data. This works for a lot of different types of data. It's good and because it's easy to read, it's practical. You can get quick messages across. There's different distinct topics in each section. And there's lots of different audiences that like this type of data viz. You can turn a simple fact sheet about your program into an infographic like this quick data. There's also this versus comparison type layout. It's good when you're trying to compare things side to side. In here, it talks about myth versus fact. I've used it for things like state versus national data. There's clear ways to spot the similarities and differences between these two groups you're comparing. But the downside is it's two groups. And if you have uneven information like this one, it tends to look a little bit lopsided. There's also a roadmap or a process map, good for a lot of qualitative information. So back to that question of, is the purpose is you're trying to show the relationship between things, roadmap, process map could be a really good layout for that. So you're showing that flow. For this one, it's walking through therapy options, and you could use this for program improvement as well. So if you have quality improvement data and you're looking at the steps that you've taken and those outcomes, this fits really well with that type of information. Then this layout of the timeline, love this for annual reports, for different things where you're trying to show the accomplishments of your program, different milestones you've hit over time, anything that's a chronological events, laying that out, number of people you've served, the grants you've received, really cool, easy way to share that in a report. So then there's heavy data. This is something that's more complicated. Maybe if you're working with a lot of statistics and charts, there's lots of options of how you can lay this out, and trying to keep it clean with white space or blank space. But this is another type of layout. But regardless of how great your design is or how awesome your data is, our brains are still scrambling to try and find the meaning in the data viz, in that infographic, and trying to make sense out of this story. So it always suggests that you structure the story, your data message, as introduction, main content and body, and then that conclusion or ask at the bottom. You'll find this in just about every product that we put out at MPHI, that I've touched. There's always that conclusion and ask at the bottom, either directing to a website or other resources, or what you can do as a community member. And we'll get to that. I've got some more examples of how different mental health groups that I've worked with have done that with their data. This is on the last page of your handout that you'll get, or if you've gone to the link, I think some of you have said, rock on, yeah, you got it, cool. Lots of people have said that they've accessed that resource. So this is actually something that Stephanie Evergreen has up on her website. I love it. I think it's a really helpful layout tool just for starting to think about all those things we talked about before with layout, finding those icons, connecting it to that story you're trying to tell, those main points, and then picking out that graph that's going to describe that main point. So that's available as you start building your own data viz. Coming back to this is a really good grounding point. All right. Let me drop that link in the chat from Joanne. There you go. All right. So in this section talking about layout, I know a lot of this will be, may feel like second nature, but I think saying it out loud is a good reminder as we make designs, as we do designs with our data. When we think about alignment, lining up things to text or images on the page. This one on the left is just a little bit disorganized. A good suggestion for how to improve that be something like this. So just a really quick tweak to it makes it look a little bit more organized and attractive. So lining up to those texts or those images, finding something that's either the edge alignment or center alignment for images and icons. It's just going to take that and make it a little bit more intentional looking. So a couple tips for alignment and spacing and how we justify or how we move our text around. So the difference between the two pictures here is we're being really conscious of how we place elements on the page. We're also finding something on the page to line it up with. Even if two objects are far away, we can line them up in a certain way. And we're also avoiding using more than one text alignment. So sometimes there's rules that can be broken, like maybe the heading is center, whereas all the text is left justified. But being really intentional with how we line things up will take it to that next level of awesome. I have some tools on the resource page that's looking at layout options. So there's a really good one that'll get you started with some design things. It's from HubSpot. It has these pre-built templates in PowerPoint that you can use and play around with. They're not designed to be printed. They're more for living online, but it's a really cool way to just get started with playing with design in a software that a lot of people already have. So that's the work that I do a lot of. And the infographic that I showed, the ones I'll show later, I design everything in PowerPoint, which like a lot of people hear that and think, how, like, why would you do that? And the answer is really, I want to be able to create templates that can be used by any clients that want them. So we're very open source and unprotective of the work that we do at MPHI. When we work with clients, we know that that becomes their product, and we want them to be able to use that design in the future if they want to update numbers, if they have other little tweaks they want to make to it after their contract with us ends. And I find that it's so much easier to hand off a PowerPoint file and someone can be empowered to make those changes to the data rather than hand off like a Adobe file of some type and not have access to that software. So I think access is really important in the work we do, making sure everybody can get in and edit data viz stuff. So I design a lot in PowerPoint. I know a lot of people love Canva. I think that that's great if you're creating things that are public. Just know that Canva, even with a paid subscription, is in the cloud and belongs to Canva. So if there's any sort of concerns about data sharing, Canva would not be the way to go. Okay. Yeah, so one of our last sections on design, and then we'll get another break because I love breaks, times to stretch, is talking about images. So, you know, images are critical to data viz. When we look at things like something like this, it feels a little bit cluttered, a little bit disorganized, little things to make things more neat and attractive. You know, thinking about being consistent, having a unified look, looking like something's intentional. So the one on the right pulls together, you know, the same color scheme, same like thickness of lines, same style. And another thing with images, we've probably all been there before where we have a picture and we try and blow it up and it gets really grainy like this. So looking at those high quality images, graphics, icons, things like that, getting the biggest size possible so that when we do designs and we, you know, change sizes of things, it's a very clear image. So in your toolbox, I have a couple different options for what I like to use for icons, things I've used throughout this presentation. I love the noun project. That is my absolute favorite thing to use. It is available for plugin to Word, PowerPoint, all Microsoft products. It's called an add-in, and what it does is it allows you to add all sorts of icons to your presentation. You can change the color of them. You can change obviously the size, and you can also edit them. So if you like this picture of an airplane, but you want to make the nose of the airplane a little bit bigger, you're able to actually edit that graphic and pretend to be a little graphic designer. Oh, thank you, Joanne. Yes. Yep. So it's called the Noun Project. It's a really great tool. I use it in all of my designs. And when you're just getting started with even just putting icons in your presentations, I love it. I have a paid subscription. I believe it's around $40 a year. The free subscription, the only thing that they ask is that you credit the artist. So I think for $40 a year, it's really reasonable, and for something you use all the time, it's worth it. Okay. So in this last piece, thinking back to those questions around chart design, what's going to help tell your story the best. I have some basic rules that I like to follow when it comes to designing charts with the intention of evaluation. So the neat set of rules that I have are these three things. So we want to be able to reduce clutter, be intentional with color, and add interpretation. So those are the three things that I'm going to ask you to remember as we move into these next two examples. So I'll show you one first, and then we'll have a little discussion around what can be done to the next one. So when I say reduce clutter, I mean removing all the things that don't matter to this story. So this on the before is what you get when you go into Excel and you select the default bar chart and it pops out, and then sometimes that's it. It gets added to a report and it's done, and it's ugly to look at and nobody gets it, and we're going to do better. So reducing the clutter is going to look like this. So we've removed all the pieces that are not important to the story. We have added color. So being intentional with color. We've chosen the ones that we want to talk about. So program B and C have met the goal for satisfaction. So we've paired that with the top. In black and white, it appears as a darker set of bars. And then we've added that interpretation. So without having the audience have to look at this first chart and try and figure out, how much is very satisfied, mostly satisfied, what does this all mean? We can pretty much see the trend in the first one, but this is where we're adding that interpretation of 80% was the goal for satisfaction. And these two programs exceeded that. They met the goal for satisfaction. Then we add that interpretation of this is the percent that are very or mostly satisfied with the program. And we're hitting those three things. So reducing clutter, being intentional with color, and adding interpretation. Okay, we got those memorized. Clutter, color, interpretation. Good. So now I'm going to show you this beautiful pie chart that Excel, PowerPoint, everything. It'll just pop it out for us. We feel like we're done, solved, we're great evaluators. We put this in our presentation. Everybody understands it, right? Well, I think that there's a better way to do it. I'm wondering if in the chat, you can share what you think it could look like if we reduce that clutter, be intentional with color, and add interpretation. Or if there's a brave person who wants to come off mute and give any sort. Ooh, yeah, Alex, winner. I should give some prizes. So Alex says 1 color for not satisfied and 1 color for satisfied. Love that. So that could be a really intentional choice that you're making, that if the point is to show just those that are not versus satisfied, and we don't need that 4-point, gradation of very, most, somewhat, not at all. If we just decide we're looking at satisfaction, that's great. And again, that goes back to making it really clear to the reader that that's what we're doing with the data. In that previous example we had back here, we had that, that underneath the program B and C met the goal for satisfaction. We list out, we're looking at that very and mostly satisfied. So yep, if we want to do that for that next one, let's take a look. Ta-da! Much better, very clear. Your reader is going through the pages of the report, they get to this and they see, wow, 85% were satisfied. They have their data sentence, they have the story, they have the visual as that aid, and that's it. There's always a chance to add more data as your audience needs. But again, back to that, different data for different audiences. If the point is that short attention span of, I just need to let them know this satisfaction level, boom, we've done it. And we don't have to waste any more seconds trying to understand what this pie chart is trying to tell us. All right. That brings us to our next break. I'm very proud that I'm 1 minute ahead of schedule. So we're going to come back at 25. So it's a 6-minute break. All right, so we're finding our way back. I'm going to pop over to the participant panel. Just give me a little thumbs up if you're here, or a laughing face or crying face or whatever you want to do. Awesome. Yeah, thank you, Cassandra. Love the crying face. And cat face, Alex, thank you. Awesome. Look like we have just about everybody back. So we're going to get into this last section. All right. And that was our last break before the end. So we're just going to push through this remaining hour. Again, feel free to get up and move around, take care of yourself as you need. This next section is a really fun one, looking at how all of this stuff put together, all of the design stuff we talked about, the coming up with the data viz messaging, how all those things come together and work in the real world, and work that I've done with some groups. So when we think about youth voice and data storytelling, there's some key things that our goals are, and some things that we want to keep in mind as we try and incorporate these things in. So we want to explore what the information means from a youth perspective. We'll have some chance later on in this section to talk about interpretation and how what we're seeing in the data may change from what the young people you're working with are seeing, and how their voice and their insights into the data is actually, it's a really powerful thing to include in your evaluation. And as a young person on the phone or on the Zoom, gosh, I sound old, on the phone, on the Zoom, it's so important to include your voice in the interpretation of the data, and also using that to translate findings into youth-friendly language. So taking those visualizations or any of that information you collect, and as you're putting it out into the community and into use, making sure that that language is resonating with the audience that you're trying to reach. And youth voice is also great for helping disseminate these data stories. So disseminating the findings and using the information to influence policymakers and funders. So I have the Instagram there as a way to talk about how some of our young influencers in a mental health project I worked on, how they went forward with pieces of data from their agency, and they told their own stories with data through Instagram and running an Instagram account, and they come up in one of the examples later on. All right, so one of the examples that I have from work I did, this was with Johanna and it was with Joshua. I got a chance to work on a really neat project that was about improving youth mental health in the community. And this agency was asked to come up with a why statement. Why are you doing this work? What's driving your work in this community? I don't know if you all heard that, but that was my dog telling me he needed to go outside by pushing the outside button. When I introduced myself, I talked a little bit about my talking dog that uses buttons. So just ignore that for now. So this organization, that their why statement was that we are proud to support young people through vocational training, mental health services, and meeting basic needs so that we are empowered to improve our lives and our communities. When we sat down with them and talked about how can we take the information you have and match it up to your why statement so that you can talk about your organization and talk about the work you're doing. And so we really focused on this supporting young people and the mental health services that they provide. And we started looking at the data they're already collecting. So what do you have? What data are you already collecting? And this group was using a survey to talk about and ask questions about mental health services they received, different basic needs that were being met. And they asked this question that in the past 6 months, did someone refer or connect you to a counselor, doctor, therapist when you needed help? And we focused in on this answer of yes. So the data source was the survey. We knew the story we wanted to tell is those that have been connected to services in their community. And we wanted to put it in a way that was easy to understand. They could share in presentations, and when they're talking to their board of directors, they could say, hey, this program we're doing right now, it's great. The young people we have coming through the program, 4 out of 5 said that they've gotten help from a staff member with connecting to a mental health professional. So this is the angle we took with it, of knowing what data they had, what story they wanted to tell. And we really focused in on this idea that the big message is that this organization helps connect young people to services. Alternative to that is by looking at it using different type of visual. Same thing, but this is something that they felt was going to work better for doing a presentation. So instead of having 4 out of 5, using 80%, those are interchangeable, but sometimes picking one or the other, knowing your audience is what works best. So another example is using their same survey. Different message they wanted to get out was looking at this question of, I know where to go for help when I'm sad, stressed, or depressed. So they wanted to look at those last 2 answers, people that disagree with this. So strongly disagree or disagree that they don't, so saying they don't know where to go for help when they're sad, stressed, or depressed. So they picked this was their data source. They picked the message they wanted to tell, which is, that there's a group of young people seeking our services that say they don't know where to go for help. So picking that message, finding the data, and then shaping it into like a social media campaign of, did you know that 30% of young people don't know where to go for help when they're sad, stressed, or depressed? Organization A is here to help you. Visit this website for more information. So remember that introduction, that body, that flow, that call to action. So this is following that same format. When they're designing in this container of something that's going to go on social media, they've picked the data source, they've picked what they want to get across, and they put it into a container that's going to work for the audience they're trying to reach, which is young people. They want to create something that's a norming around mental health struggles, and this is what they landed on. Then this was from another piece of data looking at 2 out of 3 young people said their community doesn't address the mental health challenges of its young people. Again, same source of data, just skipping to a visual way to show this information. Quick bite-sized piece of data can work well for if they're doing a presentation for community leaders or school leaders. But it's the message that they're trying to get across is that the community isn't addressing these challenges. Then what do we do about it? As this lives on a PowerPoint presentation slide, there's not that call to action. I would assume that there'd be more slides that come after this, but just an example of how to take that data and put it into something visual. So another example from the same grant, it was called Connected was the grant's name. We looked at a why statement around, for a different organization, is that they were hoping to change the perceptions of mental health challenges and encourage their community to live a happier and healthier life. One of the ways that they were hoping to impact this is they had a curriculum that young people could go through, and it was around kind of changing these perceptions. They gave them a survey at the beginning and they gave them a survey at the end, and they asked these same questions about perceptions of mental health challenges. So some of those questions included things about like, only certain people have mental health challenges. People with mental health challenges are violent. I don't want to live someone or near someone with mental health challenges. All these questions that were asked and asked to respond on a scale of strongly disagree to strongly agree. I think everybody can visualize how this may, how people could take this data, make a whole bunch of charts, jumble up a report, and not really get that clear message out of so many questions, so many categories. So really boiling down to what story you want to tell with the data. So for them, they wanted to focus on those shifts in mental health perceptions. And they also wanted to create these norms around needs for mental health services. So they created this, did you know 60% of students said they would be too embarrassed to tell someone they had a mental health challenge. Learn more about how this community health task force is helping reduce the stigma. So that intro, that body, that call to action, it's all there. The data is there, but it's really picked out. It's not presenting every single possible option, but it's really focusing on that key message, what's telling our story that we're trying to get across. And another way to tell this is if we're looking at those 2 different time points, so not just picking out that, these are the kids coming in the program saying that they're feeling too embarrassed to seek out help. What if we look at those changes in perceptions from before to after being part of the program? So, a little nod to all the evaluators, a really great way to look at those trend data or those pieces of before and after. So we can look at something like this. So we're adding that interpretation of what's being shown on the screen. So changing mental health attitudes, percent of students attending the group that agree with the following statements. And at the bottom of the page, the point is, after attending the group, overall negative thoughts about mental health decreased among the group of students. So it's being clear, it's being intentional with the color, it's adding that interpretation. Yeah. And then an option of if they wanted to take the data and use it in a PowerPoint presentation, the thought of having these big data numbers. 2 out of 3 students said their school doesn't address the mental health challenges of its students. All right. So our last example, a little bit of participation. Again, you can use the chat feature. You can use your voices and come off mute. This last example is coming from the YVAL survey. So this is measuring youth voice at the agency level. Real quick, if you can give a reaction, either in the chat or on your screen, if you've heard of the YVAL or used the YVAL, either or, like have some sort of YVAL understanding. All right. Well, maybe this will be a good a good clean start if nobody has used it. There's a couple of people heard of it. So the YVAL is a tool that's used at the agency level, and it measures different dimensions of development in different areas around youth involvement and youth engagement. And there's a national score that that agencies can compare their data to. And we use it a lot for looking at these individual dimensions around agencies' ability to meet these standards in youth engagement. And I'll go into that a little bit more when we look at the next slide. But things to know about it is it runs on a scale of least developed to fully developed. There'll be scores shown for the agency and national average. And least developed means none of these aspects are in place or true for the agency. And most fully developed is that all the aspects are in place. Each dimension has a set of statements below it that that feed into this score of dimension. And there's different ways we can look at it. So the first one is looking at it as a full score within that dimension. So this dimension is called leading initiatives and projects. And it's asking, are young people supported to take the lead on projects? I think there's about 8 statements that feed into this, but overall, when thinking about young people being supported to take the lead on projects, this is one way that we can look at it. So I'm wondering if anybody has a story that's emerging in the simple national versus agency. If you were given this in front of you, what's a sentence you could say about this data? These data.
We are, the agency is at an average of 3.4, fully developed.
Yeah, thank you, Jacqueline. Yes, exactly. Really easy statement. Agency is at 3.4. That the agency is doing better than the national average. So looking at this and thinking about this next slide, what would you see and what would you think if you saw this? So young people respondents versus adult respondents within that agency.
Again, young people are less developed than adults are, looking at it at that perspective.
Yeah, so a little more context on this. So this is young people responding about the statement, are young people supported in taking the lead on projects? So young people at the agency and what they're saying versus adults at the agency and what they're saying. And we really start to see that young people are saying, no, we're not supported in taking the lead on projects, whereas adults are rating this much higher. So this is such a interesting thing with data viz when we start breaking it down, looking within groups, and really showing that visual of young people are not feeling as supported as what the adults are feeling. Yeah, young people are not supported, somebody said in the comments. Yeah, so this is a powerful piece as a young person. If you find your agency doing this YVAL and then ask the question, can we look at those results and look at what we said versus what you said as the adults running this agency? It's a really powerful tool with data viz that when you're breaking down those results and seeing where maybe things are getting averaged and hidden, it starts that conversation of, hey, we're saying this one thing, you're saying something else. How can we come together on that and lead to more support? So this is, oh, it's not quite the breakdown, but this is an example of how one of those dimensions in the YVAL gets broken down. So we see that the average of our young people treated as partners in the process, we see where that average is, it's 3.4. But then when we look at these individual questions of talking about collaborative process, respectful partnering, youth and young adult friendly meetings, information sharing and communication, and transparency in decision making, I'm wondering what you're seeing with trends and what it means to you as you see these scores.
So for me, it shows that we're not below average. And where I work with CYFD Behavioral Health Services, we do what's called a youth satisfaction survey. So it's kind of similar to the YVAL, but it's a little different. So at least we're not seeing some negative, we're not seeing that they're least developed. We're showing that they're above midway, which is good because we're not looking at it like we're not below average basically. And there's definitely room for improvement, but at least we're treading along, right?
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, and I like what you said, like that there's room for improvement, and that could be a really key message of this. So seeing one data point like this in time, having that context of, okay, here's where things maybe are a little bit less in areas like collaborative process. Well, what does that mean? Why are we so high in respectful partnering, but so low in transparency and decision making? A lot of these questions can come up as we start piecing apart the data and looking at it. But one of the messages it sounds like that you'd focus on is, hey, we've got room for improvement. So on the next slide, showing a little bit of that. So this is what it looks like when this was repeated after 2 years of the grant. So we looked at where are we falling as a whole group at year 1, and then where do we go in 2 years? So I'm wondering if anybody has some key messages that they're pulling out of this.
I don't want to be the only one talking, but in my perspective, it looks like we actually have decreased, which does not look good. If I'm looking at it right, in year 3, we were a lot not a lot higher, but we were higher than what we were today. And so something changed. What changed between year 1 and year 3?
Yeah, and higher is better in this. Yeah, lots of improvement. Yeah. So the question that comes up is what changed? What context could we put to this? So yeah, lots of improvement, higher in year 3. And that's where, oh, go for it.
In terms of colors, it might be better to have the darker color be where you're currently at and the lighter color where you started from.
Yeah, I love that. And maybe that's a cultural thing that we feel like, you know, lighter and then darker is later on in time. Yeah, I totally get that. We may also have a message that comes out of it of, you know, the difference between some categories. Like we see that workforce development didn't really change a whole lot. I mean, there's a little bit, but you know, it's not as dramatic as looking at empowered representations or looking at participation in developing programming. So tools like this is that, you know, we can see that there's areas that start that conversation, and that may be clear to you at the beginning of you look at this and you pick out those pieces, and that's what you focus on when you're giving a presentation or putting together some sort of brief on, you know, this is where we're at as an agency. But it also, it's, you know, and young people on the line jump in and share your thoughts, but this is also, it means way more with the context and the information we're getting from youth that are involved in the assessment. When we did this with our group, with our youth mental health grant, so much information came out when we were thinking about these categories and why things were different. I see there's a question about why not? Why was there not a big improvement? And the really interesting thing is this grant didn't really focus on workforce development. We had a lot of things, a lot of trainings around collaboration. We had a lot of trainings around evaluation. But it was really interesting to see that these areas where the grant and the different sites didn't focus a lot of work around, didn't score and didn't change as highly. So there's always a way to shape the data message and the data story. And I think it's so unique and neat that you show this to, you know, all sorts of different groups of people, and they're going to come up with different takeaways from it. All right. So I think I'll skip to the second question. Has this got anybody's ideas flowing, or is there things that you want to put out there as like burning ideas for your work?
So Steph, like I said, we do the youth satisfaction survey, and I did it last year, both the report and the actual interviewing, I guess, of young people, like with their responses with COVID. And I love the way this looks. We look at some of our surveys. So we have like from the past like 6 years. And so it makes our charts look really busy. And I like your 3 rules. I'm hoping maybe like we can talk offline and maybe you can give me like some feedback on our report, because we're going to be doing that again this year. And I really think that this just is easy for people to read versus how I did it, because I'm old school. I'm not a data person. Our data person left, and so I had to do it. But I really love these ideas, and I would love to connect offline just to kind of get some pointers from you, because I I think this is great. I just don't know how to do it.
Yeah, I would love to. I love teaching. I love doing hands-on stuff. I love even just giving the little feedback of, transformation, graphs and things like that. And I totally get it. It's I coming from public health world where I was kind of thrusted into this data viz work. My background is not in graphic design, and I was asked just out of the blue one day, can you make an infographic? Do you know how to do that? And all of this stuff I have collected over the years. So I totally know the feeling of, a lot of people in this call, it's probably not your main thing to do reports, and it's just one of those check it off the list and move on. And I'd love to make it easier to pass on that information. And I love the ideas that are coming in the chat. I see someone sent a message to me about sorting the measures on that past page, looking from most change at the top to least change. Love that. That would make it so clear. There's no real reason why these are in the order they are. I love that you caught that. So this is just the typical, the order that they come in the survey, but why not add that extra easy interpretation and sort these from greatest to least change? Love that. Chef's kiss. Beautiful observation. Okay. So the last chunk, part 3B, is putting all of this to work. So we're going to brainstorm ideas together. We're going to have some small breakout room time. I believe we're going to break into 3 different groups. So if you want to share, that's wonderful. If you're still kind of brewing on these ideas, or maybe you feel like you need to talk to team members to get a better idea of what possibly you could do with data. All things are optional, and we'd love to hear some of your thoughts. So we're going to brainstorm ideas. I do have a resource guide that if you want to go to this page and use it, it's a fillable PDF. If not, just grab a piece of paper and you can just jot down these ideas on the side. And these are all those guiding questions that I already talked about in the first session, or in the first section. You're so good, Joanne. Thank you. Always dropping those links in. So going to that link that's in the chat, and starting with what data are you already collecting? So thinking about those different sources you may already have or have access to. I'm going to go through these questions quickly, and then I'm going to put them all up on the screen so that you can have time to talk it over and to think about it before we break out. And then what stories do you want to tell with these data? Brainstorming a few, picking out those things that are the most important to tell. Then thinking about an audience and a purpose and a container. So right there on the screen, those 4 big areas. I'm going to give you about 5 minutes to jot some ideas down, and then we'll go to our breakout rooms. Right, so hopefully everyone had enough time to come up with some good ideas or just some okay ideas. Anything will work. Just getting us thinking about these guiding questions. As we head into our breakout room, feel free to share your ideas, ask questions of others, give some feedback on things you've picked up on in the session and what you think could line up with other people's brainstorms. And we'll Zoom you off. So we'll be there for about 10 minutes, maybe 15 minutes, something like that. And then we're going to come back and talk through some of those ideas. Welcome back. All right, I used every last second with my group to talk about things. I hope you all had really good conversations in your groups. I think with this last 15 minutes we have, I had to double check to make sure I wasn't going over time, that it wasn't 2 hours instead of 2.5 hours. So with these last few minutes, I wanted to turn it over and see if anybody had things that they talked about in their group that they'd want to share, even if it's not the full rundown, but maybe some key takeaways of how you're going to use this in your future work.
So I plan on using it for all my presentations that I have to do data reports. I think it's amazing to be able to have these new ideas, and our leadership will definitely appreciate it when it's simpler and we have new upper divisions, so we get feedback and we'll see how that goes.
Awesome, that's really good to hear. I think even just small baby steps to start moving towards making things more readable, easy to digest, all those little steps, they won't go unnoticed. I think even little tiny things you can incorporate. I love to hear that. I'm really happy that that there is value in this. I do have some resources that I'll send out at the end. So there'll be, did I do that right? Yes, so we've got some resources you'll get at the end. These were all on the links, the web resources, that fillable template for brainstorming, and that one-page handout helper for design. So those will all come in shared in email. They're on those links for downloading. Feel free to share them widely. I am just happy that they get out there and are used. So if there's nothing more, my slide that I am not sharing anymore says, thanks, any questions? So at this time, if anybody has specific things that weren't covered, I've got about 5 minutes that we can talk through things, or I can suggest resources that go above and beyond the resource guide. Let me know. I've got 5 minutes extra right now. I'm also available for technical assistance. I'm dropping my email in the chat. So if you have any questions after this, I'm able to be supported as help to you if it's reviewing some sort of infographic or giving some feedback. Happy to help with that. or any other specific questions that come up from this presentation. I have lots and lots of presentations that I've given with different focuses. Some are specifically just on chart design, some are hands-on infographic design. I've done those in person. I have not done them on Zoom yet, so maybe I'm up for an added challenge of trying to teach tech skills through Zoom. I think it could work out, and it may be fun or frustrating, who knows. So if you have any specific TA requests or needs, I'm gonna share the screen. And come to these last slides.
Yeah, Steph, I want to say thank you for sharing all of your wisdom and insight with us today. And we've sort of welcomed Steph into our consultation and subject matter expertise in across the center's work. So just requesting, if you're already in TA arrangements with Youth Move or other NTAC partners, they know how to help us get you connected to Steph as well. We also want to make sure that you have invitations for a couple of things. One is we invite you to share some data with us via a feedback form. So we're really excited that these trainings are made available for you free of charge, and we continue to plan to offer a lineup of trainings like this in the years to come. In order to do that, we need feedback from our participants. So I believe the chat box already holds the link for that, and we would definitely appreciate your responses to that. And then just as Steph is available to support you all in your work, there are many other consultants and trainers with specific areas of expertise a moment away from you to help you advance your youth mental health work in your community. And so we welcome you to connect with us. Any of the places that are on this slide, the green arrow is focused on the request TA. So if you'd like a specific individual consult, that link will get you to the form to get you connected to us. You can request a specific person to work with, or you can just say, I need help creating a data dashboard and I don't know who could do that, and we will help identify the person who can do that for you. And then please connect with us in all places social and make sure you're signed up for our email so we can continue to be in space with you like we were today.
All right, we made it through and we have 9 minutes left in our day. It looks like that the survey link is one of the first links that Joanne sent up above. Right, yes, thank you. All right, well, I'm gonna give back 8 minutes to everybody. I'll stay on the line if anyone wants to stay and connect and chat. Thank you so much for joining. I'm excited to work with all of you in the future. And thanks for the work you're doing in the field.
Excellent. Beth, thanks for being with us and sharing all of your knowledge with us.
It feels good to just brain transfer.
Hi, Steph. Oh, there's the Survey Monkey. Thank you.
My apologies. I sent out the registration link instead of the survey.
Oh, thank you,
So
Joanne.
the link on the screen.
Great. Thank you, everyone, and we appreciate your feedback and look forward to being in training with you again soon.
Thank you, Steph.
Yeah, bye, Steph.
Everyone.
So Steph, I have a question, or Johanna, if we wanted TA, is there like a fee, or how do we like do TA business with you all? Like,
yeah, so the NTAC Center is funded by SAMHSA, and part of our charge is to provide direct technical assistance to communities who ask, and all of our services are at no cost. So go ahead and fill out that TA form with specific requests. It's also okay to just say, can I have a coaching session to help me figure out what I might need? That's something that we often do when communities make a TA request. And as long as it's sort of within our expertise area and our bandwidth as a center, we're able to say yes to those requests with no fee. So go ahead and ask, please.
because we're part of, we have the HTIP grant and we have the SOC grant, and we also do Youth Move National. So, so that's awesome. I just wanted to make sure before I go and get myself all excited and stuff, but Steph, I really want to like meet up with you and have that coaching session. Can you put that link again in the chat for the TA? And that this way I can complete that so I can start getting your expertise on stuff. That would be awesome.
Oh, Joanne beat me to it.
Joanne, you're
That's
so
great.
awesome.
Yeah.
You're so great.
Thank you
It's
so
like
much.
everything I say, she just instantly puts in the chat. I don't know how you do it.
Well, thank you so much. I'm
Excellent.
sorry I was in and out multitasking with meetings, but I'm glad that I got to be a part of most of it. And now I have a new resource. So thank you all for everything that you do. I appreciate it.
Yeah, thank you for speaking up and participating so much. It was really nice to hear all the stuff you're working on. And
Thank you. I try to
definitely
step
Zoom
back
soon.
because, you know, I talk a lot. And so I wait for it to be like dead silence before I like jump in, because that's what they tell us to do. So
us extroverts, like we hear the whole step back often. So yeah.
All right, guys, have a wonderful evening. Thank you so much.
Thank you all.
Bye-bye.
All right.
All right, I guess I'm gonna go ahead and close it out.
That's a wrap.
Thank you
That's-
so much. This was great.
All
Oh,
right.
I'm going to be dancing on the recording.
All right, talk to you all
Awesome.
later.
Yeah,
Thank
thank
you.
you so much to both of you for all
Yeah,
the work with it.
No, thank
yeah,
you.
thank you. All right,
See
bye,
you soon.
everybody.
Yeah,
Bye-bye.
bye.